Hello BookTube, it's Roz, it's Sunday the 20th of September and I am outrageously happy and excited today about finishing a book. That's Ulysses by James Joyce and I'm just so made up about finishing it this morning. Now, I feel like I should have music playing, bunting, I don't know, a marching band, probably the whole cast of Riverdance performing and me doing a little jig. Or if in the spirit of Ulysses, I should probably be getting pissed now and buying a pig's trotter that I forget to eat, talking a load of intellectual tosh late into the night, going to bed, creeping in and waking Steve by kissing him on both cheeks of his buttocks. I'm not going to do any of those things, but I am going to come onto here and share my happiness with BookTube, if you don't mind. Indulge me, okay? Why am I so happy? Now, it's not because I'm relieved to have finished this book. This is not a sort of like, oh, thank God that's over kind of happiness. It's a different satisfaction. And, you know, those questionnaires, interviews that you get with authors, you know, it's usually with authors, where, you know, they're asked about their reading habits. And one of the classic questions that they get asked is, what book do you feel guilty that you haven't yet read? And of course some of them say, oh well, I'd never feel guilty about not reading a book, we should all just read what we like, and that's a silly question. And some come up with something ludicrously obscure to show how clever and intellectual they are, but just typical, the books that come up most often in your kind of honest answers to that question would be, let's think, Moby Dick, War and Peace, Middlemarch, Proust, Remembrance of Things Past, and Ulysses by James Joyce. Those are like the kind of probably. I bet if you called up all those kind of interviews and magazine articles, those would be the 5 titles that come up most often in answer to that very standard question. I should ask all of you what your answer to that question would be, but I will. Yeah, do. So of those, well, yeah. Moby Dick I read a few years ago and enjoyed it much more than I expected to, if you know what I mean. Actually, it's a really good book and more fun than people make out. War and Peace and Middlemarch are 2 of my favourite novels ever. The Proust, La Recherche, well, it's not a book, it's a sequence of books, and I've read the first few. And I will go on and read all the others, but, you know, they're not something that I feel like guilty that I haven't read all of them, because, you know, it goes on, and you know, there's a lifetime to gradually finish all of those. So Ulysses was the big gap for me. It definitely was a book that I felt, yeah, kind of guilty in an odd way that I hadn't read. Guilty is the wrong word, isn't it? But, you know, there was a hole in my reading that said, oh, why haven't you read this? Why haven't you read this? And every now and then I think, oh, I really must read that. I really must read that. There's other things I think I really must read. But of sort of novels, that was definitely top. And so right now I've got a real feeling of a gap filled. So yeah, do tell me in the comments. I'd be really interested to know, do you have a gap like that you feel that you ought to fill in your reading, or want to fill in your reading? And or have you ever had this ridiculous feeling of satisfaction about finishing a book that I'm having now for whatever reason? Share. I'd like to know. So, given that I feel like that, why on earth hadn't I read this darn book before? And it's not like I'd never read any Joyce. I think it's decades since I read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which is almost like a prequel to Ulysses. Yeah, so, yeah, literally decades ago. And it's not that I don't like a modernist novel. I would say that Virginia Woolf kind of vies with Jane Austen in my affections for being my absolute favourite author, with George Eliot fighting in there a bit. But anyway, you know, yeah, modernism, not a problem. Challenging books, not a problem. So why? Why? One reason, I think, is to do with it being a long book, depending on the edition you read. So this is your Penguin Modern Classics, back when they Grey Spine Modern Classics, thinking of our Penguin Classics habits. So that's about 700 pages, I think. The edition I read, bigger pages, so 650. Yeah, so not a mammoth, but long. And again, it's not that I don't like long books. I mean, I've just said War and Peace and Middlemarch, two of my favourite novels ever. But when a book is long and you know it's going to take you quite a long time to read it, there is something, or maybe it's just me, tell me if it's just me, there is, you know, sometimes you procrastinate about it a bit. I mean, like in the time that I would read that, I could have read 3 or 4 books, say. A book's got to be good to outweigh having read 3 others, say, hasn't it? You know, you've got to feel like that time invested is going to pay off. And I have to say, I don't see length as a particular virtue in a book. It's not something I object to, but, you know, like I like good things in small packages, you know, like authors that can pack a lot into something relatively succinct. Lots of ideas or emotions or characters or style, you know, but yeah, short and sweet, not a bad thing. So yeah, length I think was one element in why I haven't read it yet. Challenging. Knew it was going to be challenging, and with books that you know are going to stretch you intellectually, I suppose. That sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? But you know what I mean. The books that aren't just going to be an easy page turner, that are going to require a bit of active input from you, the reader. Now that is a positive for me, but you have to pick your moment with those books. You know, you've got to be in the right frame of mind, haven't you? And I think I also suspected that Ulysses was one of the books that you shouldn't read too young. Is that a controversial thing to say? That is, you can be too young to read certain books. I think it's true. You know, like, you know, with Ulysses, you've been warned that it's got a lot of sort of allusions in it to other works of literature. There's a sort of political and cultural context. You know, you're going to get more out of it perhaps if some of that is there embedded for you. You know, it's not all just kind of a complete mystery. So yeah, another element of timing about that. But the other thing is, and again, maybe this is just me, but those big chunky classics, it's a bit of a feeling like, well, they're always there, so it's never right now is the moment you must read them, because like with new books, like kind of current fiction, there's a feeling of like, this is the moment to read this book, this is the moment. It's not like, oh, I want to read it because everybody else is reading it, but it is, you know, sometimes they feel as if they will be richer for being read in the moment. Whereas, you know, Ulysses was never going to go away. If I didn't read it this year, it was still going to be the same for me the year after or the year after that. So you can see how that can kind of spin out. You know, yeah, it was 1922 it was written, so, you know, there's no rush. That's what I mean. Yeah, it feels like there's no rush. So I am really, really, really grateful to Alan of Big Hard Books and Classics for kicking off Ulysses 2020 at the beginning of the year, because that's when I started this right at the beginning of the year as a read-along with a lovely crowd of people. Alan, as I say, Mark Nash, Arlene, Madeline, Sina, Noah's wife Emily, you know, a nice little crew of us were having a go, and a lovely chat on Voxer about it, and we were really unpicking this book chapter by chapter in great detail. It was intellectually very interesting. Lots of ideas off each other. Sharon Goforth, she was doing it too. So yeah, that was brilliant. But then coronavirus came along, and none of us could kind of handle that deep dive reading at that moment. It became the wrong time for that, so we stopped. but it's been hanging over me ever since. Now, I'm a bit of a monogamous reader. I've said this before, but I'm not like Sean of the Book Maniac, who likes to have, I don't know, up to 20 books on the go at any one time or something. That's not me. I quite like to have one work of fiction, and I might throw in a bit of poetry or some non-fiction along the side, but essentially one novel that I'm reading at a time. So Ulysses has been kind of like niggling. It's like it's been sitting on my shoulder saying, you haven't finished me, you haven't finished me, you haven't finished me, go and read me, I haven't finished, I haven't let you to reading it. Oh dear, intolerable. So September miraculously was the month when it felt like the right moment to pick it up and have another go. And we got about a quarter of the way through, and so in I don't know over how many weeks, like about 9-10 weeks or something. So I've read all the rest of it in less than 3 weeks, and that has actually, I think, worked better for me. But I have to say that deep dive that we did on the early chapters was really helpful in getting me into the book, getting me into the sort of understanding the mindset, the symbolism, all of that, and has allowed me to kind of romp through the rest of it at a faster pace. I had a guide. I used the new Bloomsday book by Harry Blamires. I think he wrote this originally in the 1960s, and then this is the sort of third edition, so updated. But you know what? And it goes through chapter by chapter, and you can kind of read it before or after you read the chapter, or turn to it for reference. But by about 3/4 of the way through, I kind of chucked this, really, abandoned it, apart from just telling me which was the bit from the Odyssey that related to each chapter, so I could think about that as I was reading it. Threw it to one side, and I read the rest of the book naked. Yeah, and you can do that. So when people tell you Ulysses is scary, it isn't really. It's a there's a reason why thousands upon thousands of people read this every year, why the Irish kind of see it as almost like their national novel. It is genuinely entertaining and readable. It is odd. It does have moments when it kind of starts to disappear up its own arse, but not too many of those. And it also has moments that are just absolutely thrilling in the wonderfulness of the language, or the ideas. Chapter 15, Circe, 150 pages long, so as long as a sort of longish novella or a short novel. One of the most thrilling reading experiences of my life, I think, I will say. So that's high praise. That's high praise from Roz. Okay. The other chapter that was absolutely knocked me out, I'd say, was the last one, Penelope, where we finally get the voice of Molly, who is the wife of the main protagonist, Leopold Bloom, and that was interesting because I think I'm going to sound critical here, and So Joyce is a man. Joyce is a man who kind of was brought up a Victorian and then was writing in the sort of early 20th century. This book, published 1922, he's a Catholic background. He has ideas about women that are of his time and of his culture and of his religion. The whole, Virgin Mary, Eve, original sin, virgin versus whore kind of idea of women, being obsessed with women, but also a bit revolted by, you could really tell in this book, there's a kind of revulsion at, I don't know, but fascination with women's sort of bodily fluids. Yeah. I'm not complaining about that, but there was something, I liked the fact that he chose at the end to give us kind of Molly's perspective. I don't know that he understands women as well as he thinks he does, but at least he did make that choice, and that was positive for me. So what more can I say? I'm going to stop. I think that was one of the things that 2020 will be memorable for me. Something that when I look back on 2020, I won't only think coronavirus. I will also think, hey, that was the year I read Ulysses.